is going to be how is going to be upside down. That is, how can that practice be utilized for human health, and ultimately that what we possibly need to get our or you guys, I have nothing to do with it, or your terminology around that. Moreover, another example from history, curare was discovered, neuromuscular blockers were discovered in the same way, and by now the native people lost that art altogether and had to relearn it medically from Westerners. So there is a danger in over-dicing the categorizations and losing the pragmatism that is, to some degree, at least for me, is a primary goal. Because the times they are changing, as I believe Billy Joel said.
Yes, thank you, Alex. And if to take into account that we need something to start with, just something to generate future hypotheses in the field, right? Because even if we introduce the generation stages and argue about generation stages, it would be kind of subcategories later which come in to, of course, this question will come in if every deity yoga is the same, or peaceful or restful deity even showing different patterns. But at least to start with something, with some kind of categories, at least to introduce them, at least to start generate hypotheses about them, I think. Just to start research going, because again, we're not there. The Vajrayana is not in scientific frameworks. And if suddenly some Vajrayana practices coming, like compassion meditation, they put into very weird categories and they're not even considered as Vajrayana. And they consider completely in isolation. So at least to give some topology, not very detailed, but something to start working and starting to do research and generate hypotheses.
So I'm intrigued by Alexander's point, but I'm not sure I fully, like, I feel like I need a little bit of clarification. Like, do you mean that if you spend too much time worrying about the sub processes, you might miss some kind of holistic effect, or?
Maybe not necessarily holistic in some way. So we can apply the more or less scientific, at least controlled studies to the practice, and then characterize the practice. Either you tell me what it is, or I can characterize it by the results. If that practice results in, let's say, increased cognition, then I can say that within itself is a definition of the practice, and I can then study which components of it are and what the physiologic underpinning of that increased cognition, because there's a lot of physiologic underpinning, obviously, that needs to be studied. Those underpinnings, to me, are probably the first target for adaptation into the Western medical scheme. I think those underpinnings would be easy because it won't take 20 years of studying to do that. And as we were discussing, not all of us can run 100 miles a day and 1,000 marathons end to end, as the Buddhist runners did. So we can always find that area that is either adoptable or from utilitarian point of view. That's what I am interested most, and I am just afraid that perspective is not coming out as a significant or or perhaps one of the most important. Of course, there is always the anthropological background to everything. But as I said, do we need to know shamanism in intrinsic, in the real detail to utilize the herbs that shamans can use to cure illnesses?
Well, it's an interesting example because the point is that in both cases you have a simple chemical that is the thing you can extract from the practice. It's not at all clear to me that when you talk about meditative practices, they're embedded in a long curriculum, that there's anything to extract. So it's an empirical question. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if you discover for certain things, you know what, you can't learn this over a short period of time, or it doesn't work the same way, taken out of all these other precursors that existed and so on. If you think these are, you know, complex cognitive strategies, let's say, that are based on a developmental history and so on and so forth. So it's an open question, but it's striking that the two examples you chose are ones where you put aside all the shamanism and all the things that the shamans would probably consider are central to their practice, and you extract a chemical from it. You know, and there's a whole, I'm not sure it's the best model, in other words, for the kind of
it's you might be able to extract the method. So when we did the study with the peripheral resistance, with the vasodilatation, there was a gentleman who climbed Everest, and he was interested in utilitarian. He was one of the controls, was interested in utilitarian thing, how not to freeze on the mountain, and he spoke. I didn't publish it, but he spoke with lamas and learned it for about a week or so, breathing exercises and visualization. At the end, we restudied him, and he was acting more like a tumor practitioner rather than the control. So that is where the method can be extractable. I like oversimplifications, because that's how my brain works.
Well, again, I would just frame it as that's a particular goal, and we should be clear about that one, because it may be in more or less conflict with other goals that other scientists might have, or certainly other practitioners.
Oh, no, I wouldn't doubt for a second that there is multiple aspects, but from immediate perspective of alternative medicine, whatever that's supposed to mean, that will be the most reasonable approach. Of course, it doesn't exclude any other that are far more sophisticated.
I mean, it strikes me that those two approaches in particular are not antithetical to each other, because if you don't have a full sense and inventory of what this practice involves, it's pretty hard even to isolate in on something. I mean, you may very well be isolating on something that's before your eyes, when in fact something that's not in your vision, because you didn't bother to do that, is really the active ingredient. So just taking the time, which most scientific studies don't seem to be doing from my perspective, to fully understand the practice, if you have adequate assistance in that regards, then you can begin to say, okay, I'm going to focus on this because I know that exists. Whereas if I only knew that 3 phanes were operative in this practice, and I was totally oblivious of 5 context and 6 actual more subtle techniques that were going on, I wouldn't even have thought to isolate on that because I wasn't aware of it. So it strikes me these two approaches can be also supportive of each other in that sense.
Absolutely, and that's where I would look for you, Dave, to tell me what I should be studying. Again, I'm a people's mechanic, and like any tool, I have to be put up for the task, and you can define task much better. But then again, you can't ignore what you see either. I think it's called empiric criticism in philosophy.
If I could just comment briefly, I don't know that we've got a pragmatic problem in the group here, because it seems to me we're all recognizing there are a number of goals here, as Lawrence says. And we also have a number of possible mechanisms for going forward. We're already talking about a paper, a joint paper, which is probably going to focus on essentially making the case for Vajrayana practices generally, and on the basis of clearly one or two examples. And we're also talking about conference proceedings, which presumably going to be might be more inclusive and have a more include much more of the contextual and Buddhist studies, anthropological, etc. material. We've already got David and Michael's project at Virginia, which is looking at the particularistic study in considerable detail and so on. So, I mean, I don't think we've really got a major problem here, except perhaps to work out just how do we prioritize and where do we put our immediate time.
But anyway, I mean, one of the goals, like I really interested to pursue, and this is the goal, like why I was trying to put this conference together, is to give a boost to study for Vajrayana practices to be studied in scientific community. Because as I mentioned, we have quite a mess, I'm sorry for this word here, with NDA only one, collapse to FA OOM, and nobody understands the context, nobody understands the practices, and there are different NDAs and they're completely different from cognitive perspective. And we need to finally look at these practices, which beyond everything could give us exceptional cognition enhancement techniques, which we do not have in science. So for me, it's really important for science to start doing first experiments to motivate scientists and to motivate them, to give them some framework which could generate hypotheses. And for scientists, as Alex put it, too complex framework, we going for simplicity because this is how we design neuroscience experiment, because this is how we are effective. So very complex frameworks will not generate hypothesis, scientific will not push it forward. So we need some middle ground. We need some framework, not too complex, but more sophisticated we currently have in neuroscience, and more kind of Buddhist studies driven, not just pulling some practices, Vajrayana from here and there, but we need something more Buddhist study driven and at the same time, more scientifically driven. So we need to see, like to study all kinds of cognitive processes involved and how these different practices different. So this is the primary goal right now, because if we go with bottom-up approach to study one particular practice, I mean, the science will never get to Vajrayana. I mean, it will take 50 years, 100 years. It will take too long.
I have one thought. Some of you may be aware of the attempts by the folks in the TM community, Fred Travis and some of his colleagues, to introduce a third category in a fairly unconvincing manner, that there's this FA and OM, but there's also self-transcending, and TM is self-transcending, unlike FA and OM. And of course, it's just kind of it's like because they trademark transcendental, then therefore it's transcendent. But I do think that the closest thing that I can approximate to a vision for an additional axis to introduce to the scientific literature that is kind of not being overtly attended to in the scientific kind of exploration of the neurocognitive and related clinical benefits to contemplative practices, may be this aspect of the relationship to self processes. And so I think it's a function of our human tendency to just have such a challenge at and approaching it with anything that can seem objective, you know, this kind of the degree to which we are aware of the self in an ongoing way, and what kind of self-awareness we are aware of, and the kind of, you know, narrative self versus experiential self. I think that what's clear in the literature is that the contemplative practices are kind of, whether it's an FA or a focused attention, or it's an older literature that we did look like Zen practitioners, you know, there's always some kind of reference, not always, but often some kind of reference. Well, this has to do with something about the transformed kind of relationship to self-experience, but it's not yet being systematically included in the way that some other metrics now are. Mindfulness, which one could say there's a component of you know, kind of experiential self shifting that is attendant to the definition of changing in the capacity of those qualitative questionnaires assessing mindfulness, but it's not central to it. Equanimity, non-attachment, you know, some of these other questionnaires that people in the contemplative science community are now coming up with to kind of at least put a little more scaffolding on the qualities of mind that are really trained to these practices. All I'm saying is that maybe it is possible, and I'd be curious to hear from others present with a little bit more philosophical and Buddhist practice expertise, the degree to which including some metric around the ongoing self-experience could be practicable.
I'm not from philosophical perspective, but I put it as one of the first categories, you know, how scientific categories, how we can introduce Vajrayana practices, because see, like all these generation stages and completion stages with sign, they actually, you generate yourself as a deity. So you build body schema of a deity, you build mental world of a deity and emotional world of a deity. So it's not self, it might be some kind of decrease in self-referential processing, but it's clearly increase kind of, you know, in body schema and so on. So, and of course you identify yourself with deity, but it's not exactly the same, and it's working in focused attention or open monitoring styles of meditation. So that's, I think, is one of the most interesting aspects of how Vajrayana could be introduced. And, you know, and I think we really need to think together, you know, how we can characterize in this respect and what hypotheses we can generate and how we can introduce from self-referential perspective. I mean, this is one of the most interesting aspects, but I'm trying to say it's only one, because like I introduced physiological aspect, and it's very clear, this is not relaxation technique. Vajrayana is arousal. And all what we study so far, it's complete relaxation. So I try to come from physiological perspective, but what I'm saying, it's not enough. We need to pull together the whole picture. Here, physiological arousal. Here, self-referential processing. Attentional processes could be completely different, or cognitive control. This is what Michael Inslich said, you know, it's totally different types of cognitive control, because here we have cognitive control with distractors, and here we have cognitive control in a relaxed state. Those are different types of cognitive controls. So what I'm thinking to pull together, it's the whole picture of different dimensions, which could be important. And yes, self-referential processing is one of the most important ones. But I think none of these dimensions by itself would be enough, you know, and this is another reason why I'm trying to put these metrics together, because we need to come from different perspectives. The one perspective not enough. So just to try to match everything together.
Perhaps, excuse me, just in the flow, before I forget, there are these major, let's say, frameworks or taxonomies over the years, starting from actually focused attention and open monitoring, but actually it comes already from Kahn and Polish, 2006, where they nicely distinguished between the concentrative and the other, more mindfulness-based or meta-awareness. So I think Ryle and Polish were the first ones to to address this distinction. Then Lutz et al. Made it explicit in terms of focused attention and open monitoring. And then another one was in 2015, this phenomenological matrix, very detailed. And Dahl et al. Is influential with constructive attention regulation, deconstructive and constructive. And those relates in particular to the self. So when, for example, you described the deity practice, I had in mind the possibility to think of this as, in some sense, also perhaps a kind of constructive or deconstructive, but in deconstructive, constructive as related to the self. But if in a paper, in a position paper, whatever, one sketches these major frameworks, and there are a few more, for example, also addressing non-dual, how non-dual awareness practices are. And then there is this thorough consideration of the different Vajrayana practices. And to my knowledge, this has not been done yet in the literature, to have a systematic review. And perhaps if some cognitive, physiological, and self-related components, there is a kind of breakdown, in the practices of this, we can try the reverse to bridge these components, these core processes of the practices to the frameworks, maybe more than one, or how does it relate to this framework or this other one? And if these are not enough, maybe another framework can be created that is more comprehensive. For example, to understand the physiological, the eye arousal aspects, to me is really innovative, to really think how the arousal dimension even can affect the different non-dual awareness practices. So maybe one new framework could be developed. I think a nice development can take place.
Yes,
So
and
as I mentioned yesterday, Antonino, this is something that I've been involved in for a little while now, and a review of all the different taxonomies and the kind of genealogy of this secondary kind of literature. And yeah, we can go back and we can trace. Open monitoring clearly comes from the set phrase open awareness, which was introduced by Walsh and Shapiro in 1984, and so on and so forth. So, and concentration comes from focused attention comes from concentration. And anyways, there's a genealogy of this, and the papers that we've all cited, the Lutz paper and the Dahl et al. Anyways, I just want to say that I just sort of emphasize your point, because I've been thinking in the same ways for a while, and trying to look at the history of this and sort of pull things together and then build on it. I think that is a valuable approach. I can say much more, but just I think it's a valuable approach.
so yes, sorry.
I'll very quickly, because I agree completely with what's being said, and I just put in the chat a couple of points that could be used for organizing some of this. First of all, to acknowledge that there's been some reluctance to study Vajrayana, or less attention to it, and there are reasons for that. One is the claim that people are already studying the core things. They don't need to study that because they're studying representative or exemplary practices. The other is that this is very rare and esoteric, so we'll get to it later. And the third is it's too complex, kind of a similar argument that you need simpler models. So each of those can be sort of acknowledged and maybe countered in some ways in terms of the different arguments that you've arrayed already, Maria, in terms of the expertise as a way of drawing out things and bigger contrasts and so on. But anyway, and then there's the basic goal of wanting to preserve the traditions, but that's a separate task, and to honor them by giving them scientific attention, insofar as that's a legitimate form of recognition. But the third part for me is what we've just been talking about, the idea that maybe the universe of dimensions and so on can be enlarged further, that it's not at all clear that we have the right parameters or complete set, comprehensive set out there already. Moreover, if you do that, you may notice different contrasts and a different way of organizing things that might, in fact, be clearer. And then finally, that by studying these things, you can then begin to see how they fit together in different ways. So anyway, those are all specific reasons for saying why Vajrayana should be, aside from just that, like any other important phenomena, it deserves attention, but why it would actually be useful to these larger debates around what's the field of meditation studies and so on. So anyway, I think I'm just rephrasing exactly what was just said by other people in more depth.
Yes, so I think thank you, Lawrence. So we can just take this direction, and I can just put together some simple framework, like columns and different, rows, and I send to you guys, and we will start to go back and forth and see, what really we need to add there without making it too complicated as the beginning of, like as a starting framework. And then, if there is reason to believe it should be shortened or expanded, and then we'll try to come up with something which, will make sense to both, like both sides, Buddhist scholars and psychologists. And yeah, so this is kind of one paper now, like about the proceedings in general, which Geoffrey mentioned, because we have a lot of interesting presentations. So I don't know what you think we can do with that, because we can go and try to publish something like edited book, small book, let's say in Springer, or we can put as an issue, or there is a bit maybe problem here because some people were presented review of already published research. So what you think? I just want to hear your suggestions.
Well, if I can just comment quickly, since we've talked a little about this before, I do think that if you just look at the material in the pre-recorded lectures, and particularly among other things, the interviews with the two lamas and the which are amplified in the interviews in the discussion sessions, just to have and I am aware, as we discussed before, outside this context, that different people in the group are in somewhat different positions in relation to how they might want to publish both what was in the prior discussions and in the actual discussion meetings. But I think to have some kind of publication, whether in the form of a special journal issue or a short book or whatever, that just puts that out there and makes it available would be wonderful, and I'd certainly support that.
So maybe then I will just contact again individually, and we'll see who interested to contribute, right? That would be really great. And who feels that, they don't want, or they already have this published, then that's also okay. Yeah, that's okay, right? Or I don't know what people think.
Actually, I would like a bit of input, perhaps from Michael and David in particular. Perhaps other people may want to talk about this in relation to the material, and perhaps also Elizabeth, the material from the lamas. I mean, it seems to me that though we have a kind of fairly detailed and granular account of Vajrayana in practice in two related but somewhat different contexts, and it's not something that's easy to find in the literature. I think it would be very valuable to have that available, but do people have any thoughts about the best way to make that available? I mean, it could be a simple transcript of the interviews with a little bit of commentary, perhaps. It might be something else, I don't know. And I think it also would respect the role of the two lamas in relation to what we're doing, if they're included directly in some way in what we produce, which I think is also an issue here.
Will that be provided, the videos, perhaps along with transcripts at least?
Yeah, we can do. Yeah.
seems like having commentary on that contextualizes it and explains particular terms, links them to tradition, links them to other things would really enhance the value for a person who doesn't already have all that background coming to it.
Yeah, I would agree with Lawrence. I mean, it strikes me that just in the last week, I've been returning to a long-term translation project. And I've been reading it like every couple of weeks with someone in Europe who doesn't know Tibetan, but is very knowledgeable and so forth. And just the degree to which she can't understand the translation, it floors me. I mean, in the sense that, not that there's anything wrong with her, she's very smart, but just without like very detailed commentary. I mean, I talked to her for like 2 hours about a page. She just can't get it. And so I think that's really important if you want to make it more than tokenism and enable people to have some sense of appreciation or understanding, then some type of contextualization and notation would be crucial.
That's my feeling really too, yes.
But Geoffrey, I mean, you're talking only about these commentaries on these two lamas, but I think it would be really great to add to the same issue, let's say your talk, David talk, or some kind of talks which anthropologists and Buddhist scholars, again, to show not just lamas, right? What you think about it just makes sense.
I wasn't suggesting that was all we did. I was just suggesting that I think that is one important thing that might go into the book. I think it's inevitably going to have to be up to the individual participants here, what they feel about what they can put in. I mean, it would be lovely if David and Michael, say, could work up their material as papers, and that might be fairly easy as chapters. That might be relatively easy for them to do. It might be more difficult for some of the neuroscientist people, participants, because the whole style of publication is more different, perhaps, from what we had in the lectures. But I think we can leave that to people to some degree to work out. Though we perhaps need to think at some stage about some kind of coordinating mechanism. Are there going to be 2 or 3 editors here, say, who are trying to put this together? But maybe that's a little bit down the road. I don't know.
Well, I think we can think about it right down the road, but I think it's a very good idea to do these things. So, I mean, I would definitely should go with this. I think edited book, right? I think it's probably would be edited. We'll see how it will go and who will decide to contribute. Yeah. Okay. So
is there is there an advantage of doing a book over a journal, special issue in a journal? Or like, is that something worth weighing? Because I just have a feeling that somehow journal articles get cited more often. And I mean, obviously a book has a certain kind of posterity as well. Like there's advantages and disadvantages. I know like for me at my stage in my career, it's kind of nice to write a journal article as opposed to a book chapter. But I don't know how others feel about that.
I know
sometimes they actually get more visibility.
Which one?
Mindfulness.
No, we're not going there because we're not about mindfulness. We really want to add something to mindfulness.
No,
we don't want
it's
to.
It's very Maria. It's a very open journal. The title is mindfulness, but the editor is actually a friend. Nerb Singh is very open-minded. So really, for example, there is a special issue. I am guest editing about Buddhist psychology, meditation, and mindfulness, which or there are special issues about mindfulness in different spiritual traditions. So it's really very, it has a very comprehensive approach.
It's just like interdisciplinary, and it's not a bad impact factor actually. And I feel like people in the meditation community kind of keep their eye on it. Just a thought. And there's other journals too, like there's like religion, brain, and behavior, but it's not as high profile, I would say. and it's a little bit, you know, there's a few different kind of like interdisciplinary religious studies.
Yeah, and one doesn't necessarily preclude the other. I think people can describe what they want to do and what their favorite venue would be, and you could do the, you know, the collective paper and a series of articles in a journal, and ultimately a book, you know, in that sequence or something like that, and that would benefit people in different ways.
My only curiosity will be, so how to work it out then the position article that we had this idea of this joint article in some sense, no? And then how to coordinate temporally this effort, which presumably will take time because we know to integrate different with the project of which is very nice to have a special issue. Or should first perhaps the position article go and then the special issue? I don't know. It's just an idea of the temporal coordination of these efforts.
I think we can try together, you know, because we need to put positional articles first, I think, but whatever people will be able to work at, we'll try to maybe to coordinate together. I also will try, maybe we can do this way. I will try to check different journals, including mindfulness. I will try to talk to Springer editors about possibility. So first I will try to find out where, you know, where we can actually put collection of these papers, articles, and maybe then a book. But at the same time, I will start sending around this position paper, these matrices, which we can start working on.
So, so David and I are actually at the very beginning of launching a journal of contemplative studies, and we have a platform. It'll be a digital, open access, peer-reviewed journal. That's conceived with an emphasis on the humanities and kind of humanistic scholarship. However, we are very open to interdisciplinary, certainly special issues. And if something like this, which already has a kind of cohesiveness to it, because we've been in discussion and have shared materials, and if we can elaborate on that and build that into each other's contributions, and that was an interest, a form of interest, then we would be interested in that as well. So it's called the Journal of Contemplative Studies. We'll be launching it. Well, we're on track to launch it this summer or early fall. Yeah.
And it will be possible to put the kind of collection of these papers as a
Yeah, we
special
can have a
issue.
special,
Great.
like you could serve as the editor of a special thematic issue on Vajrayana contemplative practices in science, or whatever we want to call it. We also have, just of note, preprint service. So if there were scientific studies or studies from the humanities that, you know, wanted to go through the preprint service, or weren't quite ready for the, you know, the thematic issue, that is a parallel service that we're providing as well. Although ideally we want this bundled as a thematic special issue that's peer reviewed and published together.
Okay, great, thank you, Michael. I will be in touch about this issue then, and that would be a great idea.
Yeah, so it's a good idea. It's a good timing for us too, because we're also building the timeline for the next 18 months to 2 years and so forth. So yeah,
it will
so
take
please
a while.
email David and I.
Yeah, it will take a while actually to put all the transcripts, to get all the transcripts from Lamas. So probably will take a bit of time, and also Antonino, it will take probably months for me just to get all the transcripts together. So like in terms of timeline, and then Michael, I will be in contact with you. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a nice fit too, just because we're also, you know, we're interested in contemplation at large and in a very kind of multifaceted way, not, you know, we didn't call it mindfulness, or even though mindfulness may be broader, we're really, that's the intent of the journal, is to diversify the vision of practices.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to go in a minute. Just have other, I thought this was 1 hour long, so I have some other commitment. But I just wanted to add two things. One is that we do intend at the University of Virginia from our center, the Contemplative Science Center, to start what we're thinking of as a kind of consultancy service, because we don't really have any scientists at UVA that are doing deep work on contemplation, and yet we have this very dense humanistic expertise amongst multiple faculty. And so we're planning to launch a consultancy service that offers humanistically inclined services to partner with scientists who are interested in that on contemplative research. And we're going to start with working with Ken on this DREAMS project. So I just wanted to mention that. And the other part is, as Michael said, building ontologies of diverse types, ranging from super granular ontologies that are intrinsic to the Tibetan perspective, and then lighter, more high-level categories that have different perspectives, is really crucial to this larger project we have on the Encyclopedia of Tibetan Buddhist Contemplation. So we're definitely committed to that, and we would also be willing to host a workshop, which I think would be useful at some point, do advanced work, and then bring together key people to really work in intensive fashion over several days together with all the, I mean, not like a remote workshop. I mean, you know, I think something where we're actually together and you have that time to percolate and have informal conversations. So we definitely would be interested to host that.
Nice.
Nice, thank you, David. David, before you go, just one very short thing, because I think it's kind of important also. I wanted to talk about grants, and I just want to mention one thing, and this is because this conference was actually specifically targeted to get money from UNESCO to study Vajrayana. And I had discussion with UNESCO headquarters in Paris, and the situation is that the idea that this workshop will be just a starting point to put together, and I will send to UNESCO these recordings, to put together a workshop actually arguing that we do need to preserve these practices and study them scientifically. And then they have two types of grants. The first one is Tier 1. This is small assistant grant, and this is for larger workshop, which we plan to do in Bhutan together with Ministry of Culture, about possible research projects. So it will be possible, I hope, you know, like to go to Bhutan and to establish really collaboration there with the lamas and think about possible projects. And then they have Tier 2, which is a large assistant grant for several million, but kind of the second step, and we have more kind of detailed program what we want to do. We can go with a larger scale grant. So this is what I actually wanted to say. Yeah.
Nice. I wanted to say, having a good position paper maybe could really open as a first probably step to.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the good position paper is really important to start this going for this grant. And yeah, so David, I just wanted to mention that this is this possibility, and to everyone, so that I really kind of hope, you know, to engage you guys in this workshop in Bhutan when we will be able to get this money. So and about other possibilities, I also wanted to talk, you know, if anyone knows any other grant agency we can possibly apply with this project. I mean, if any ideas would be also helpful.
Maybe Templeton?
Templeton, right? I mean, if anyone knows about Templeton, Michael, I think you know the most, right? About Michael Sheehy, about the Templeton.
I would actually turn to David. He's the maestro. David, you still there?
David left probably.
Yeah, I'm still here. I mean, with Templeton, it's all about, they put out these big calls and we just have to see what's active right now and see if we could formulate something that aligns with them. Obviously, they have a lot of money and give it a lot of it away, not always to great effect. So their filtering system seems rather erratic. So I think the best thing is to see what the active calls are right now and see if one of them could align well, and then talk to a program officer and see if it makes sense to pursue.
Okay, I'll check Templeton. I think they sent some solicitation recently. I check what their calls are exactly.
I'm also going to have to go at this point. So thank you so much. Really stimulating, and I hope I can help somehow in all this noble cause.
Thank you, Lawrence. You're very helpful. Thanks a lot. And yes, so I think then we will try to target UNESCO and Templeton. I will check Templeton, and then we will be in touch. I will be in touch with everyone about all next steps.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all of you. You know, like these weekends was really difficult, but I really appreciate your involvement and discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot to you, Maria. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Maria.
Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, thank
Nice
you,
to
Mike.
meet you all. Yes.
I hope we all get to rendezvous in person.
In Bhutan,
Yes.
right?
That sounds like a useful aspiration.
Yeah. Okay, happy Easter to everyone, and bye. Bye.
All the
Bye-bye.
best. Bye-bye.
Bye.